It's all yours.
Hi, everyone. Hi. All right, we're going to get started. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm Belle. I'm on the events team here at Books to Magic. We are so excited to have Genevieve Kingston and Adel Calhoun here with us tonight to celebrate Genevieve's incredible memoir, Did I Ever Tell You? But before we get started, I want to point out some logistics for tonight's event. So first thing is bathroom is right here behind the moleskins if you need it during the event, and then we're going to do an audience Q&A, so start thinking of questions now. And after the talk tonight, Genevieve will be signing and personalizing books in that cubby over there, so we'll let you know where to line up for that. And if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of the book online in the link in your description. Thank you. So this memoir, oh my gosh, it does truly read like a novel. It's intimate, gorgeously written, and don't just take our word for it. The New York Times calls it heartfelt. Good Morning America calls it unforgettable. And Ann Napolitano says it's compelling and heartbreaking and reminded me how beautiful humans can be when life breaks them open. So please come by more after, because clearly it's an incredible, incredible book. Genevieve Kingston holds BAs in Theater and Linguistics from UC Berkeley and an MFA in Acting from Brown University Trinity Repertory Theater. She's the author of 4 plays and 3 one-acts. In May 2021, her essay, She Put Her Unspent Love in a Cardboard Box, appeared in the New York Times Modern Love column. Did I Ever Tell You is her first book. She lives with her partner in Brooklyn, New York. Adel Calhoun is the author of Also a Poet, named one of the best books of 2022 by the New York Times, NPR, and the Washington Post, longlisted for the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Nonfiction, and featured on the Today Show and PBS NewsHour. Prior books include New York Times bestseller Why We Can't Sleep, coming next, Crush, a novel, so exciting. So without any further delay, please join me in welcoming Genevieve and Adel.
Thank you, Belle. So Belle and Bex are here to let you help you do your shopping for all of your holidays. It's wonderful to be in this incredible store. It's so great to be here with you. So I just met, I think many of you have her as a friend, Gwen, at the Simon & Schuster Centennial Party. I just spilled a martini on myself, and she was incredibly sweet, and she told me she had her first book coming out, and I think there's some authors here. You know what it's like to have a first book out. It's so thrilling, scary and thrilling, and what a triumph. Congratulations to come out of the gate with something so strong and so beautiful. Who's read it already? Oh, many of you. Did you cry? Yes, we all cried. Okay, so anyway, start thinking of your questions. We'll talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll throw it over to you to ask Gwen whatever you'd like to, and we will do a lot of shopping. So I thought maybe just if you could start off by just giving us a little biography. How did you come to become a first-time author? And yes, just take us to the present day quickly, please.
So I've always told stories, and I used to tell them as an actor and using other people's words. And then I started finding my own words as a playwright. And then all of the theaters closed in 2020, and I started writing differently. And it felt like time to tell the story that is at the center of me, and at the center, I think, of why I tell stories. And that's the story of me and my mom.
Yeah. So what were you like as a little girl, and what was your mom like before she got sick?
So my mom was this incredibly sort of formidable, capable, I think a lot of people use the adjective fiercely intelligent, fiercely loving, fiercely dedicated to my brother and myself. And I was this, she used to call me a changeling. I was this child who just didn't belong in my very kind of buttoned up Anglo-Saxon family. She was like, you were meant to go to an Italian family somewhere. So she sort of didn't know what to do with me. And she, from the very beginning, she was such an intentional parent. She hit the books. She was raising your spirited child was sort of always strewn around her house. She was like, how do I parent this little changeling girl?
So can you talk a little about when she first got sick, how old you were, and how that was for you? What was it like?
Absolutely. So she got sick when I was 3. So I don't remember her not being sick. My memory is always that her mortality, her death was something that was a part of our family, a part of our home, and an organizing principle of sort of how we spent our time. And she received a terminal diagnosis when I was about 7. And at that time, she sort of shifted her attention from doing everything she could to fight her cancer and to try to figure out how to survive, to starting to prepare for the possibility that she might not survive. And she did that in this extraordinary way, which is that she put together a special box, one for me, one for my big brother, filled with gifts and letters for every one of our birthdays until we turned 30, and for getting our driver's licenses and graduating high school and getting engaged and getting married and having our first children. And so she really wrote down in those letters one side of a conversation that she and I have been having for sort of the last 20 years since she died. And this book for me is really my side of that conversation. Here's what happened since you've been gone. Here's how your letters helped me through the challenging bits.
The executive function required to put that kind of thing together.
Right.
I mean, I don't have it in me personally to do that. I was talking to my son this morning. I was showing him the book and everything.
You're like, sorry, it's not
I was
happening.
like, don't hold your breath for this. This is not going to happen for you.
Well, I don't think, the older I get, the more in awe I am of actually like sitting down, like completing, right? Actually the emotional energy that takes.
And yeah, I thought it was so beautiful to admit to the fact that like you came to, in some ways, hate the box while she was putting it together.
Yeah, I was jealous of my like future self. There was this like other version of me that she was preparing for, that she could imagine, and I was like, but I'm right here. Yeah. And I was not an easy child, and so there was part of me that was aware. It's like, maybe in some ways it's easier for you to spend time with this like hypothetical version of your daughter than like the one who's here just like being really a lot.
Right, you're engaged to Will, who I think is here, who's dashing fiance. So she was able to imagine that for you, and well done. So we've talked a little bit about how so my father also received a terminal diagnosis, and then he outlived his original diagnosis, and by years, and my mother started quoting. There's a Pirates of Penzance song. It's like onward we go, forward on the foe. Oh, you know it well, thank you. Forward on the foe, right? It's like they do this very elaborate song, and then, I think it was the police captain goes, but you don't go, right? So it's like there's this suspended animation of like, okay, this building up to this departure, and then the departure doesn't happen, and then what do? You live in this sort of netherworld. I thought you did such a beautiful job. I'm sure a lot of us have had that experience, right, of the terminally ill being among us, and then you just don't know. It could be tomorrow, it could be in 10 years, and living with that uncertainty is so difficult.
Yeah, it was like always the last Christmas, and it was always the last birthday, and it was always the last Thanksgiving for years and years and years, and it was just exhausting. And after a little while, we were like, we cannot, this is unsustainable. Like, we can't keep living life to the fullest. It's just, we simply cannot. Like, you've got
Let's phone it in for a year.
You've got to be able to forget at certain times, right, that our time is limited, and waste time. The freedom to waste time, I think, is something that I craved so much.
Yeah.
The chance to forget and enjoy.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So as the book goes on, you open each one of these presents and you cry, as one would. Can you talk about what were the ones that really stood out to you? The moments where you opened something and you were like, wow, this is actually exactly the present I needed right this minute. And other ones where you're like, oh yeah, this didn't land. Like what was that year after year, this experience of what she was able to predict and what she wasn't?
Yeah, the crying, yes. My editor was always like, in the margins, he'd be like, did you cry? And I was like very uncomfortable with putting all that on the page. I was like, it's none of your business. Yeah, so the one that really sort of knocked my socks off was for my first period. I was 12, my mom had passed away sort of 5 months before, and I actually had the great joy of having our two family friends staying with us at the time, women, but I didn't know how to talk to my dad about this. And so what I had was I could go into the box, and there was this like 4-page typed letter that was all about boys and romance and my changing body and what it meant to belong to a community of women, and a package of maxi pads. Like just 10 out of 10 of mothering. and I have the whole letter, or most of the letters in the book, because I think her advice was just so beautiful, and so what the advice I think a lot of folks would like to give their daughters if you had time to really think about it. Usually just sort of happens to you. It's like, oh God, it's time to have this conversation, right? But if you could prepare. And then a time when there was really nothing that she could do to help me was, there's an event, it's late in the book, and so I won't go into it, but a really, really difficult event in my life that came, 10 years after she passed. And it was just this thing of like, this box has nothing for me. There's nothing. She could never have seen this coming. She could never have made it better. So there were ways that she could be right there for me, and ways that, even a living parent can't be there for their kids in all the ways they want to, can't protect their kids from the tough things that are just going to happen.
So I'm wondering if you can talk about the experience of grief a little bit. So, one thing that I found is it's extremely unpredictable, right? Like that you think maybe it's going to be this slow, upward climb toward wholeness and health, and then actually it's just a total roller coaster,
Absolutely.
right? Of like, somebody called it like a trap door that just like opens sometimes, right? And you fall through and then you climb back up. And so can you talk about your experience of grief, and also like, did doing the book help in some way put a structure around your grief and around your experience in a way that was healing or helpful?
I think it absolutely did. I think that, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, that like dates aren't important to everybody, but for those of us who do feel a connection to dates, like calendar dates, sometimes it can start to feel like the calendar is like full of minefields, right? Where you're just like looking at it and you're like, oh God, that's coming up again, right? And
well, Mother's Day yesterday,
so
right?
Mother's Day, right?
Hard on a lot of people.
I think there are a lot of people that's a tough one for. Her birthday is tough, which is also my birthday, which is interesting, the day she died, things like that. So I do find that even when I think, oh, it's been so many years, this is just a number on the calendar, what does it matter? And that sometimes I'll even forget that it's the day, and I'm like, why am I feeling so like, ugh, so off today? So that's one thing for me, is that the calendar really does keep reminding me how long it's been, and I often sort of say, half joking, half not, that it's like, I feel like I should be done with this by now. Like, I've been without her for 20 something years. Like, I should be done. Like, if that makes any sense. And then, writing the book was incredibly helpful. I think that just it felt like spending time with her in this really sustained, lovely way. And, I started writing the book when I was 31, because I'd opened all the birthday presents, and what was left in the box was engagement, marriage, baby. And I was trying to figure out whether those were things that I wanted for my life. I think it's a time when a lot of folks are thinking about the future, and maybe you want to talk to your parents about that, or maybe you really don't want to talk to your parents about that. But either way, I think you're looking to the examples you were set. So it was a time I wanted to go back, read all of her letters, ask people for their memories of her, and try to kind of reconstruct the example she'd set me of the kind of woman she was, kind of woman I wanted to be.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So can you talk also about like when you figured out this was a story that you wanted to tell? Like, I feel like as a memoirist, like having that box. Did you have a lot of friends who were writers who were like, well, there's your book?
That's
right
exactly
there.
what happened.
Yeah.
My friends, I was talking with a friend on it. It was 2020, theaters were closed. I was feeling around in the dark, kind of writing some different things, writing personal stuff, which I hadn't done in a long time. And I was actually writing a totally separate piece I was writing about my dad, and a dear friend of mine who's a writer, we were sitting on a park bench, and I was tangentially explaining this piece of it about the box, the magical box, and she was like, this is a book, that's a book. So eternal gratitude to her for that. But in that feeling around, in that trying to figure out my point of entry into the story, where does it begin, where does it end, why am I feeling the need to tell it now? As an exercise for myself, I wrote an essay length piece that was just sort of like, at its core, what is this story? Where does it begin? What's the frame? What's the sort of major dramatic question? And after I wrote that, I realized it could stand alone, and submitted it to the New York Times Modern Love column, and was very glad to get it placed there.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of mystique around that column.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some writers here who who have probably submitted to it because it's just got such a reputation. And what was that experience like of being edited for it, and what was it like when it came out? Was there a lot of, did you get like a million emails?
Yeah, and what astonished me about it, what was so incredible to me, was that I was hearing from such different people with such different stories, and all like that. So many people could find something to connect with in this. I was hearing from, I remember a man whose wife was dealing with early onset Alzheimer's, and he was worried about how to preserve that relationship and that connection for his children. I heard from people who were saying, my God, my mom's 90 and I still don't think I know anything about her. I can't believe that you got this incredible gift of her sharing herself with you in this way. And over again, people said, I'm so sorry this happened, but what an extraordinary mother you had, and how lucky that she was able to do this for you. So that was sort of my takeaway from all the emails I got. Everybody said, oh my God, you're so lucky. And then I joke a lot that my first draft of this book was, my mom was cool, the end. Like Gwen Kingston. Because I am kind of in awe of her. But part of what makes me so in awe of her was her willingness to share not just the good, soft, tender stuff, but all of herself.
Right, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, about you and your brother talking to her therapist. I mean, you really did it. Like, and I think so many of us want to know about our parents, and there are things maybe we're just like, maybe we don't need to know everything. And I just thought it was so brave of you to look at the dark side too.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, in your book, and also a poet, of course, you're listening to your dad, all of these recordings, right? Interviewing people and hearing him talk about you and talk about, there's stuff that there can be moments of, ooh, do I want to know this? But for me, I always felt like there was such scarcity with my mom, right? The time with her was limited from the very beginning. Everything felt scarce and precious, and I always wanted more, which is really where the title of the book comes from in a lot of ways, which is that I continue to have a relationship with my mom. I continue to learn about her, partly because people are always saying, did I ever tell you about the time this happened? And I say, no, tell me again, because then I have another story of her, another piece of her. But yeah, I discovered that when the preparations she made for us, it wasn't just the box. I found out that, I was 19 and I was struggling, and I ended up contacting her therapist and saying, I know that confidentiality is a thing, but like, could you talk to me? And she said, oh yeah, your mom said, if you ever came asking, I should tell you whatever you wanted to know. She was ready for me. She was always 10 steps ahead, and she wanted me to know all of her if I wanted it. That was the offer. Get to know me as a person, as a whole person with rough edges and contradictions and mistakes, if that's what you need.
Should we all do that with our therapists? Is that a takeaway from us?
It's a very personal decision. I think the point is that it was an offer and not a burden, not an insistence, right? If she'd said, my therapist is going to get in touch with you in 10 years to discuss me, right? That's a very different thing. But saying, like, if she comes asking, if she has questions, if she needs to know this, then tell her anything. Tell her everything.
Yeah, amazing. And of the things that you learned over time, what were the ones that have stuck with you the most or been the most useful? I always think it's so interesting where, like, our relationship to our parents, like, changes even after they die, right? Like, somebody was just saying, like, oh, my relationship with my mom is really great right now. Like, she's been dead for 10 years and it's better than it's ever been. So what was it that you learned that was useful?
She'd had a bigger life than I'd realized before my brother and I came along. Like, the scope of it had been wider. She'd done things I didn't really know about or didn't really understand how important they had been. She started a nonprofit in Santa Cruz that feeds people, that's still going. I learned more about her life before being a mother, and then was sort of amazed to understand or re-understand that she still considered being a mother to have been the greatest adventure of her life and her greatest accomplishment, which I found sort of incredibly moving and beautiful, and also I think was sort of the engine behind my own questions around love, marriage, children, the things that I was grappling with those last three boxes, saying this is the path that she chose, this is what she found most meaningful, even though her marriage to my father was very complicated. And if that's where she found meaning, is that where I should be finding meaning, or does meaning perhaps lie elsewhere for me? I think we're always it's really hard not to live in reaction to our parents' choices, whether that's in emulation or in, or we run in the other direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to make you read a page or so in a minute, and then we'll turn it over to questions. So start thinking of your questions now. I'm going to anticipate one question, especially because you do have family here. So I feel like whenever you write a memoir, everybody suddenly gets very concerned about your family. What do they think of it? Do they like it? Do they feel exposed? And so I wonder if we can tackle that now in anticipation.
Absolutely. I was very nervous about that just because I want to be mindful of people's privacy. At one point I was like, I'll change everyone's name. Like if you want, no one will be unrecognizable. And one by one, everyone sort of said, no, I'd like you to use my real name. I feel like it'd be weird to read this book and not, and then for them to be to be able to not I can't keep them straight. So Kim is Terry and who, then everyone sort of said, no, please use my name. The person I was most nervous to show it to was my brother, because he is just everything to me. And he's the one person who, if he didn't like it, I'd be like, right, we're throwing the whole thing out. Never mind. It doesn't matter. And he read it in 5 hours. And he cried a lot, and he said, I have a couple of notes, and I said, I understand, tell me. And he said, I would like the record to show that I also had to take piano lessons, and that you've got me playing the wrong video game at the beginning of the book, and I just don't want people to think I was playing Warcraft in 2001, because that's not cool. So the rest is great.
Amazing.
Everyone's been wonderful.
I have found that is often true, and I wonder if the memoirists here feel that way, is you never know what's going to bother people, right? And it's often not the things you would think would bother them. I did a Modern Love, actually, where it was about somebody I'd had a romantic encounter with, and I described him as scurrying out of the room. I showed him the piece. He said, I'm a man, I'm not a mouse. I don't scurry, I leave. And I was like, if I change that one word, the whole thing is fine. And he was like, yeah. You never know. I thought he was going to make me change the whole thing.
Which is so great, because you're like, I can change that word.
Yeah,
I'm a writer. I got a lot of words.
I got a lot of words. That's good. So, okay, I'd like you to read, starting over here on page 7. Or do you feel okay with the microphone?
I know. I'm I didn't practice with these props. So here we go.
I think it's going to be good. You got it. Okay. And then think of your questions.
So this is the section I'd like to read is about the first time I ever opened the cardboard box. So this is 10 days after my mother passed away, and this is the morning of my 12th birthday. My mother and I shared a birthday, and any other year I would have run down the hall and crawled into her bed. My father would have brought us hot chocolate or a bunch of flowers and called us the birthday girls. My mother would have squeezed me and said, as she did every year, the best birthday present I ever got. Instead, I stayed in my bedroom, delaying the moment I would have to open my door and find her gone. For months, the cardboard chest had sat on the floor of my bedroom, and I had tried to ignore it. During those months, the chest had represented a future I'd hoped would never come. Now, I moved slowly from the bed and knelt beside it. I drew the latches back one at a time, making the moment last. When I lifted the lid, the first thing I saw was a large black spiral-bound sketchbook with 2 red pears on the cover. My breath came faster as I pulled it out and opened it to the first page. Dearest Gwenny, a record of letters and keepsakes put by to acknowledge and celebrate significant life events. I've made this record for you just in case something happens to the letters and keepsakes themselves. The pen I used to write this record, I also give to you, and may it give you pleasure. Love, Mommy. Clipped to the binding was a green and gold fountain pen, the kind that used wet ink. I pulled it free, feeling its surprising weight in my hand. Tears blurred the words in the page in front of me. My mother had shown me the sketchbook years before, and, like the chest, I'd pushed it to the back of my mind, another tool I didn't want to learn how to use. I measured its thickness in my fingers and pressed it to my ribs, hungry for the words promised inside. Beneath the sketchbook, the chest contents came almost to the lip, boxes of different shapes and sizes fitted together in a 3-dimensional puzzle. I searched the top layer of packages until I found the one marked Gwenny's 12th birthday. It was a cardboard box patterned with seashells tied with pink, curling ribbon. Holding it in my hand, I felt the first sharp twinge of curiosity to see what my mother had chosen for me. I untied the ribbon, and opened the box.
Okay, so I think now we are going to turn it over to audience questions. I have to repeat the question for our viewers at home because it's being live streamed and they can't always hear everything. So who would like to go first? I'm gonna have. Oh yeah. Okay. Hi.
I'll give you one.
Yes, please.
Were there any pieces as you were writing of the story that you didn't end up including that were hard to let go?
Okay. Question for the audience at home: were there any pieces of the story that you wrote and didn't include that were hard to let go?
There were many pieces that I wrote and didn't include, and almost none of them were hard to let go. You know, it's such a memoir is an aspect of a life, right? And so many memoirs span a year or 5 years, or and this is 30 years because it had to be. And so I had to be so rigorous with myself about only including the things that really served the story. This is the story of my mom and the way that she managed to parent me beyond her own death, and anything that didn't serve that story really had to go. I guess the only thing that was hard for me, there used to be a lot more Star Trek in the book, and my editor kept kind of cutting back on the Star Trek, and then at a certain point she was like, do we really need any Star Trek? And I was like, the Star Trek stays. Just the right amount of Star Trek now.
Yeah, it's beautifully structured and very intricately structured and seems effortless. Did it go through a lot of revisions? How did you assemble it?
It definitely went through a lot of revisions, but I always wrote it as a 3-act play because that's the structure that I know. So I knew it was in 3 parts. I wrote each part, the first draft of each part I wrote in 3 months. And then I sort of would send one in. She'd say, great, don't do anything to it, just keep writing forward. We got to the end and then I started editing them in pieces and then finally editing it as a whole book. And so my experience was I could hold a part, like part 1 in my head and kind of see the threads of it and see how it all connected. And then by the end of it, I was trying to hold the whole book in my head at once. I've never had an experience quite like that. I don't know if it's always like that, but holding a whole book in your head at once and trying to see how everything affects everything else. We did that over here, so we have to do that. It was like my skull needed to get bigger. It was wild.
That's great. Wait, was there? Yes.
I have 5, but I'm gonna pick one. I imagine as you were doing all this research and you were thinking about all these questions that you had about her, is there one question you would ask her that you never got answered through your exploration of her as a person?
Okay, wait. For the audience at home.
Basically, do you have any questions you would ask her?
Do you have any questions you would ask your mother?
I guess I always want to ask her, is this anything like you thought my life would look like? Because I think the longer we spend apart, the more you worry that you become someone who they wouldn't know or recognize anymore, like you'd pass each other on the street and not know. And that's so wondering if I'm anything like what she imagined.
And so you're getting married soon. Can you tell us anything about the wedding plans, when it's happening? And also, it must be very poignant though having these rites of passage now, sort of with her memory so close to you.
Yeah, no, obviously she really anticipated that would be something that I would really want her there for, and wrote a letter and a box which I get to open later this year.
Oh, you haven't done it yet?
No.
Oh.
Well, there's engagement and then there's wedding.
I see.
This is the whole thing. So I think that the way we're making sure that she feels present is where we're getting married is some land in California that belongs to my mom's extended family, and so it's a redwood forest that's, I think, the place that she and my dad were happiest.
Oh.
So it feels like they'll be there.
That's beautiful. Okay, was there another question? Other questions in the back? Yes, please.
This ties into this where you're talking the time period in your life right now. So you're down to 2 boxes. And I'm just wondering how that feels, that there's only 2 boxes, and does it make sense to you that it stops there? Or was there some sense that there might have been other things that she would have created boxes for?
Okay, so the question is, you're down to 2. 2 more packages from your mother. Do you feel like there should be more? Should you have done more? And how does it feel just having the 2 left?
You know, I thought it would feel really scary. And instead it feels like the boxes have done their work. I have been loved in this incredibly intense and beautiful way. And I get to carry that with me. But the other thing is, it never really seems to be done. Like, so I told you the therapist story. Another thing was I was working on the book. I got in touch with an old boyfriend of hers who I'd never met and said, you know, they dated when she was like 17. And because I was trying to check something, and he got back to me within like 4 hours and was like, absolutely, would love to talk to you. Your mom said if you ever came asking, tell you whatever you want. Yeah, I was just like, it never stops. There may still be people waiting for their phones to ring. And then I was finishing the final draft, and I found this package. I found this like envelope of letters I had never seen before. I swear they weren't there before. That was her like these letters that were going through, it was more like a journal, but they were still written to me and my brother, going through kind of what she was thinking about during her treatments. And it was like exactly corroborating the timeline that I'd been trying to like get together. It was her, like, it's never done. There's always more.
Incredible. Okay. Yes, I think we've got time for a couple more. Yes, please.
Gwen, did you ever peek ahead?
Okay, question is, did you ever peek ahead? I think many of us don't have the willpower to just peek ahead. I think I would have peeked ahead.
So you say that, but I just think that if you've read fairy tales and if you've read myths, you know what happens when you don't follow the rules set by the magic, right? Like, this was the closest thing to magic that I can imagine. It was very clear to me that I needed to follow the fairy tale rules. You know, something terrible would happen, I think, probably, if you messed with that kind of power. But that being said, I did peek just once toward the very end of the book, and it was for, I think, a very good reason.
Yes, please.
I was curious if at any point in either letters to you or your brother or your mom contributed to your relationship as siblings.
Did your mom talk about your relationship with your brother? Is that the question?
Yeah, whether that contributed to our relationship. You know, I think my mom did a lot of work when she was alive to try and ensure a close sibling relationship. Like, she really wanted that for us, and we are incredibly, incredibly close. But in the actual letters, you know, it's funny. They were so personal. Like, we didn't even really talk about our letters with each other. It was like these private conversations that we were each having, and we each had our own very different, very specific relationship with her. And so it was almost something that was, you know, if anyone has siblings, you know that often one of the things you really want is a relationship with your parent that's just yours, and that feels individual and precious. And so I think these were just, you know, one-on-one.
So he didn't get maxi pads,
But
a
a lot of cufflinks.
A lot of cufflinks. Okay, I was gonna guess, but yeah, okay. That's fascinating. Okay, yes, I think this might be our last. How are we doing, Bella Max? We've got okay, one more, please.
The book
Take
is
us out.
so lyrically and structurally accomplished. I was wondering, given that this is a new form for you, both how you went about learning it and also how your work in theater impacted it.
Oh, okay. So question is, new form for you. How did theater influence your work in memoir, and how did you learn how to do it so well?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, I was absolutely, so I read every memoir that I just was like, please, everyone recommend your favorites. I read everything that I could get my hands on, and I'm still, of course, working my way through. There are so many gorgeous ones. But I really wanted to understand the genre and where it was now and how my book would live in that landscape. So that was part of it, just educating myself, taking class. And some of my writing class buddies are here. And then, you know, I think storytelling is storytelling, and I think that scene and dialogue, you know, are important across forms. And I think that actually I was sort of reveling in what you get to do on the page with a book where you just get to give so much interiority. Like, you know, in Playwriting, so much is about what's not on the page, what's not said. It's all, there's so much, it's all about subtext. And you are giving your words over to someone else to interpret in this very important way. And so to have this much control over how the reader receives the story is both very daunting and very intoxicating. So it was really exciting to kind of spread out in all that white space.
That's wonderful. Okay, well, so I think we are going to wrap up now. I think Gwen will sign your book. Everybody, make sure you can buy them for all future holidays. Get extra copies, and then you
forgot to get something for your mom yesterday.
Yeah, great Mother's Day present. Excellent Mother's Day present, but also Christmas. You can get it early. And also do lots of other shopping. There are many other wonderful books here, and let's support our fantastic local bookstore. So thank you for having us. And thank
I'll be very quick. That was so wonderful. Thank you both so much for being with us. And yes, please come up to the front if you'd like to buy a copy. We also have Ada's books for sale as well. So you can get a ton of books if you'd like. And then if you're still with us on the live stream, again, books are available in the link in the description. And then Genevieve will be signing and personalizing books in the cubby right there where my coworker Bex is pointing now. So we are going to line up here and we'll get your names for the personalization. And then, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.